On a suffocating summer night in Phoenix, Arizona, a 10-year-old girl named Ame Deal took her last breath. She died inside a small plastic storage box. Amy was just over 4 feet tall and weighed a frail 59 pounds. The box that became her coffin was less than 3 feet long, a foot wide, and a foot deep. She was forced inside as punishment for taking a single popsicle. When police discovered her, her small body was contorted and soaked. This was no tragic game of hide and seek, which is the heartless lie her family tried to sell. This was the final brutal act in a years-long campaign of torture, carried out by the very people who were meant to love her. This story is more than a single monstrous crime. It is a terrifying journey into the heart of a family that decided one little girl did not deserve to live. And it is a story about every system, every person, and every chance that should have saved her, but instead let her fall into darkness. Welcome to Secrets in the Shadows. Here, we uncover the dark truths hidden in plain sight, the stories the world tried to forget. If you care about justice, about the voiceless, and about shining a light where others won't, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story from the shadows. Now, let's begin. To understand how Ame Deal could be murdered by her own family, you must first enter the chaotic and toxic world she was born into on July 24th, 2000. Her life in Pennsylvania was fractured from the very start. Whispers poisoned the family with rumors that her father, David, was not her biological parent, a cruel lie they would later use to justify their abuse. Eventually, her mother, Shirley, lost custody, and Amy was cast into the care of her sprawling, dysfunctional family. This clan was bound together by misery, drifting between states like Utah and Texas before finally settling in a cramped rental home in Phoenix, Arizona. That house was a pressure cooker of neglect. When Amy died, at least a dozen children and several adults were crammed into its small rooms. The adults included her grandmother, Judith Deal, her aunt and legal guardian, Cynthia Stoltzman, her cousin, Samantha Allen, and Samantha's husband, John. Amy's own father, David Deal, was there but not there, reportedly living in a tent in the backyard. He was a ghost in his own daughter's life, even denying she was his own flesh and blood. In this suffocating home, a vicious hierarchy was born, with Amy deliberately cast down to the very bottom. She became the family's scapegoat. Investigators later learned the family excused their cruelty with the claim that Amy wasn't truly one of them. School officials, in the brief time they saw her before she was pulled from school, saw a little girl who was blamed for everything. In the twisted logic of this family, the scapegoat becomes the lightning rod for everyone's rage and frustration. By pouring all their hatred onto Amy, the family found a perverse way to bond. She became the source of all their problems, and punishing her became their horrific, shared ritual. The torment Amy endured wasn't a secret. It was a daily, brutal reality. These so-called punishments were never about discipline. They were about savoring her suffering. This wasn't the crime of one hidden monster. It was a group project where torture became normalized in the house. The architects of this horror were her cousin, Samantha Allen, and Samantha's husband, John. They were the enforcers, and not a single other adult dared to stop them. The abuse was designed to break her mind and her body. Amy was described as being chronically hungry. She was starved systematically while others ate in front of her. That popsicle wasn't defiance, it was desperation. Starvation was a weapon to crush her spirit. They also used food to humiliate her, blistering hot sauce, dog feces, dehumanizing acts meant to annihilate her dignity. Her small body was always a target, forced to perform grueling exercises under the punishing sun, hour after hour. Backbends, jumping jacks, circles until collapse. Aluminum cans crushed beneath bare feet. The paddle, the butt buster, relentless. These were not random fits of rage. They were calculated power displays. And the worst were the games. Locked in closets, shoved into the same box. Darkness, silence, panic. It wasn't punishment anymore. It was sadism. They weren't correcting her. They were feeding on her fear. And everyone else stood by. Amy's suffering did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in our world, surrounded by systems designed to protect children just like her. But at every turn, those systems failed her. Her death was not just a family tragedy. It was a catastrophic societal failure. The warning signs were there, but they were tragically ignored. Before the family ever set foot in Phoenix, reports of child abuse had been filed in Utah. But those red flags never followed the family to Arizona. When they arrived, Arizona's CPS had a clean slate on them, giving the abusers a fresh start to continue their reign of terror. Once in Arizona, the signs of abuse were visible to the outside world. School staff noticed Amy's constant bruises and the family's disturbing dynamic. But before any meaningful intervention could happen, she was pulled from school to be homeschooled. This single act plunged her into total isolation, erasing her from the world and leaving her utterly alone with her tormentors. Even the police had been to the house on unrelated calls, but they never uncovered the horror story unfolding within its walls. Each visit was a lost opportunity, a chance to see the little girl no one was fighting for. At the time, Arizona's CPS was in a state of collapse. It was chronically underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed. Caseworkers were drowning, and a backlog of thousands of cases had gone uninvestigated. Because no formal report of abuse was ever filed in Arizona before her death, Amy remained a ghost in the system, invisible to the very people who could have saved her. Her heartbreaking death became a rallying cry, sparking public outrage over the state's failure to protect its most vulnerable and exposing how a broken system can have fatal consequences. July 12, 2011 was a blistering day in Phoenix, with the heat climbing to 103 degrees. It was the last day of Ame Deal's life. Her final hours were a horrific crescendo of every form of abuse she had ever endured. The reason for this final, fatal punishment: a stolen popsicle. For that one small act of a desperately hungry child, her cousins, Samantha and John Allen, decided she would pay the ultimate price. First, they forced her to perform punishing exercises under the relentless sun for over an hour. Weakened and dehydrated, she was then ordered into the small plastic storage box. She had been forced inside before, but this time was different. John Allen snapped a padlock on the box, sealing her inside. He was the only one with a key. That box was a tomb. It was so small, she had to be crushed into it, her knees pressed tightly against her chest. The lid was shut, plunging her into a world of darkness and suffocating heat. The adults then simply went about their night. John Allen would later claim he fell asleep, forgetting the little girl he had locked away. Inside that plastic coffin, Amy died a slow and agonizing death from asphyxiation, heat stroke, and dehydration. When her body was finally discovered hours later, the scene was devastating. She was lying in a pool of her own sweat and urine, the silent, tragic evidence of her body's last desperate fight for air. When the police arrived, the family's immediate instinct was to lie. They concocted a hollow story that Amy had been playing hide and seek and must have accidentally locked herself in. It was a pathetic lie that crumbled under the slightest scrutiny. The condition of her body, the padlock, and the stories of abuse that the other children in the home finally began to share, it all painted a clear picture of murder. The game was over. The investigation into Amy's death shattered the family's wall of silence, exposing the years of torment she had endured. The trials that followed laid bare not just the facts of the case, but the chilling absence of remorse from her chief tormentors. Samantha and John Allen, the primary architects of her suffering, were charged with first-degree murder. During Samantha's trial, her shocking lack of emotion on the stand became a defining factor for the jury. In 2017, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. Her husband, John Allen, was also convicted of murder and sent to death row, making them the first married couple to be on death row together in Arizona. The other family members, whose silent complicity enabled the abuse, also faced justice. Cynthia Stoltzman, Amy's aunt and legal guardian, took a plea deal, receiving 24 years in prison for child abuse. The grandmother, Judith Deal, was sentenced to 10 years for her role. Even Amy's father, David Deal, who had disowned her in life, was sentenced to 14 years for failing to protect his own daughter. Amy's death served as a brutal awakening for Arizona. The tidal wave of public fury forced a long overdue reckoning with its child welfare system. In the years that followed, sweeping reforms were made. The overwhelmed CPS was dismantled and reborn as a new, standalone agency, the Department of Child Safety. The change was designed to fix the very systemic flaws that allowed Amy's case to be missed. New laws were passed to strengthen how abuse is reported and investigated. The state made concerted efforts to reduce caseloads for social workers and increase funding. No system is ever perfect, and the work is far from over, but Amy's story became the catalyst for real, tangible change, forcing a state to rebuild its promise to protect its children. Rest in peace, Amy. The love and care you deserved in life were stolen from you, but your memory lives on in every heart that hears your story. You'll never be forgotten. Thank you for joining me today in uncovering another story from the shadows. If this case moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's make sure Amy's name and others like hers are never forgotten. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you haven't yet, explore more stories here on the channel. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and never stop looking into the shadows.